Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. In our last episode, we talked a lot about Resident Evil Extinction. It's personally one of my favorite Resident Evil movies, and we spoke about the displays of leadership within the movie, as well as the hubris and excess of humanity, and the juxtaposition of these different types of characters displaying alternate types of humanity. So we're going to continue that discussion from last time, and we're going to start where we left off with Claire trying to decide whether to go search for Arcadia in Alaska or to continue on as they have been. So at the last point, Claire was discussing this journal that Alice had found in a bathroom at a gas station that said that it was isolated and safe in Alaska. And Claire was really reluctant to go ahead and just make that decision for everyone. She was really feeling the burden of leadership, particularly since they just lost so many people in that fight with all of those crows. So at this point, Claire is really upset, and she's like, look, these people trust me with their lives. They don't need pipe dreams. And Carlos says, well, maybe that's exactly what they need. They need hope, because he recognizes that morale is really down. So Claire ultimately decides that this is too big of a decision for her to just make unilaterally, or even with the advice of her core council, which is at this point mostly Alice, who she just met, and Carlos and Kmart and LJ at this point. So she goes up to the rest of the group, which is also largely children at this point of varying ages, and says, this is too big of a decision for me to make for you. We're going to essentially have a democratic discussion and vote as to who wants to do which option. So they go ahead and they vote, and they decide they're going with hope, and they want to look for the Arcadia. And I really enjoyed this flexible leadership mentality that Claire displays here. For her, this leadership position is really not about power. For Claire Redfield, it's just about saving people and making the best informed decisions that she can make. She listens to her people, and Carlos being concerned about morale and being right to point that out is something that Claire totally recognizes, even if she doesn't necessarily think that it's a safe option or that it's going to pan out. If she thinks they're going to use all this gas getting up there and may have trouble at that point staying warm and everything, it is still important that she hears Carlos out. And I really appreciate that about Claire, where she is still evaluating the morale, just like a really great leader would. It's not just about getting things done. It's about weighing the variables again as you continue in the journey and seeing if the measures of success you were using before and the goals you're trying to reach now are still your top priorities. Is this still the right thing to do? And is this still the right way to do this? Claire is flexible even when she is in charge. And I really enjoy seeing that type of display. So she has everybody raise their hands, And she's like, who wants to go to Alaska? Who thinks we should keep going? And they largely want to go to Alaska. So she's like, all right, then we're doing it. And she walks past Alice and she's like, I don't think this is going to work out really, but all right, let's hope you're right. So they decide to set out for it. We also, as we continue on in this caravan, see Alice riding with Carlos, which makes sense, and Kmart as well. Kmart really likes her a lot and is seemingly fascinated by Alice. So that makes a lot of sense too, because Kmart is a child without a parent, really. Everyone Kmart knows is dead. That's why they call her Kmart, because they found her in a Kmart, and she decided she might as well start over with this new name, since the one that everyone else that she has ever known and called her by has died. So they're in the car, and Kmart is sleeping on Carlos's shoulder, and we see that Alice is reading that journal about Alaska/Arcadia at this point, and it says, still people, living people, loving people. And it reminds me of that scene from Arrested Development where Lucille Bluth says, hurt people, I like it. And she interprets it all wrong in Lucille's case. But I really enjoyed that made me think of that. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to be a very sweet moment. And it was as well. And in this case, it really worked out, no matter how you read it, to be the correct way. But it's just the repetition of people, I think, that got me. But if you guys are Arrested Development fans too, go ahead and watch it again and see if it makes you laugh too. But it says still people, living people, loving people. And I really enjoyed that concept that a loving humanity is giving Alice a morale boost, as she also sees Kmart sleeping on Carlos's shoulder as they drive, and she smiles at that, and Carlos smiles back at her. It's a really nice interaction between these characters, and it just also humanizes Alice a little bit more. We know that she is a person, but because of her superpowers and this almost like Messiah type journey, I suppose, that has really been thrust upon her. Like, she didn't ask necessarily for the T-virus to bond with her cells and pretty much make her immune and everything and to be the cure, more or less. But here we are. That is where Alice is. And so in this way, because it's not something she asked for, it's a little Jessica Jonesy in a way. She is doing what she has to do because she's the one who can do it. But at the end of the day, she really likes to be around people, She just feels that it's not safe for her to be around anyone because Umbrella is still trying to track her down, even years later, and she doesn't want anyone else to get hurt again. So I really enjoy this display of Alice that's more humanizing in a lot of ways, and that also, once we get into the movies with all the clones like this one, it can be easy to forget that there is an original Alice in the middle of everything as well. So it is nice to see that human aspect of her. Although the clones are also human, but the movies in general treat them as expendable, as plot devices, just as much as Umbrella treats them that way. So it's nice to see that in that manner, and to see that it's not just the regular Joe Blows in the caravan who need this sense of hope. Alice needs it too. That's why she picked up the book to begin with. It's not just about finding a safe place. It is also about hope for her. She and Carlos can do fine without that, and so can Claire, but there is still a part of them that, even though they are afraid to dare to hope, that still is going, maybe there really is some place still out there, a last vestige for folks to turn to for refuge. So I really enjoyed that part, and it's a very small moment in the movie, but still, I like it. All right, we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the caravan's trip to Vegas and how that turns out.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we were discussing how Claire and the caravan make the decision to move forward towards Alaska and how everyone is reacting to this concept of hope and morale, especially seeing Alice reading that book where it says, still people, living people, loving people. It's a diary or a journal rather than a book per se. And it looks a little serial killer-ish on the inside with all of the taped in pictures and things circled in bright red and other things written in different inks. But it's the apocalypse. They're probably finding all of those half-filled pens that we all had in our houses lying around. That's what the person used to write it with. So she's reading that. It says, still people, living people, loving people. And that also struck me as such a really great moment that was very understated because Alice has come up against so many awful people in her journeys at this point. Some truly, truly awful people in so many different ways. But even just within this movie, she has already been running from Umbrella for, 5 years? She has encountered the Nemesis Project in the one before this, where they turned her buddy Matt into the Nemesis Project, essentially. Or, less essentially, more literally. And so a lot has gone on for Alice lately, and it's been really rough. She's ended up deciding she has to be alone for a lot of the time. The times that she has gone in and tried to save people lately have gone horribly awry. So granted, at least Alice was not responsible for killing somebody with the flames that she magnified to destroy the Corvids. But she did encounter those people earlier with the Colosseum style death pit filled with zombie dogs. And they were all absolutely terrible and depraved in a multitude of ways. So she's had to deal with that. She's also had to deal with Umbrella in general, so evil businessmen, evil scientists. It's just been a lot for Alice. People of all walks of life have just really let Alice down as well. And yet she still hopes. And it's not just about people being alive or there being a safe place. Alaska isn't just a safe place. It's a safe place where she can't hurt other people, too. And she can be with other people. So there are still people there. Living people. Loving people. It's about more than just the place. It's telling us that they are seeking other people at this point. There's a very sociocultural aspect to it that I really enjoy. And they get it across in just 3 separate 2-word sentences and a look between 2 characters. Outstanding. I loved it. So they're in this car when they're having this moment on their way to Las Vegas because they know that on their way to Alaska, the only way they're going to be able to get enough gas since the tanker and everything are all dry is to go to Vegas because they have hit all of the gas stations along the way in these small towns going up and down these highways. since Alice is sitting there with them too, we've seen her at a couple gas stations that we've gone along in the story before this point. She lets them know, oh, hey, you can't do that one. I've already been to that one. They're like, okay, well, we did this one. And they discover, okay, we know what we got to do, but it's going to be absolutely terrible, and we may lose more people, but we have to go through Vegas. And so they think that Vegas is going to be absolutely chock full of crazy, dangerous masses of the dead roving the streets. And they're prepared for horrible things to happen. They are essentially just clenching their teeth and continuing forward with what a lot of them don't think is a super ideal plan, but it's the apocalypse, so there's nothing ideal anymore. They head into Las Vegas, and as they get closer, they see that it's just pretty much deserted, and it's covered with sand, which is not at all what folks anticipated. And it reminded me a lot of our current situation with social distancing and the stay-at-home orders that are going throughout the United States. It's not what folks anticipated. This is not really what a lot of folks thought that a large-scale pandemic or an apocalypse-type pandemic might look like. It's not exactly what it looks like in the movies, even if you do watch pandemic movies. So it's very interesting to me how it's also not what they expected. But if you look at pictures right now of the Vegas Strip during coronavirus, and you also look at it in Resident Evil Extinction, then it's very similar, except there's just more sand in Resident Evil Extinction's portrayal. So they're going through there, and they explain that, 5 years of no people being there, and there just being sandstorms all the time from the T-virus somehow making most of the Earth go barren, has resulted in everything being empty. And they think that all of those corvids that they saw in that nearby town were actually from the Vegas area, and that they had picked clean all of the human remains there and all of the undead that were there, and then become infected and gone on to their town. So there are no skeletons anywhere. That part I was really confused about. So if the corvids had picked the undead's bodies clean of the rotting flesh, which, I get that. Like, maybe they didn't eat all of it, and that's what I was going with at first. I'm like, oh, okay, they've been eating on the undead. That's cool. But then they get there, and everything is covered with sand. Like, there's not even a little bit of a rib cage poking out of somewhere, or, some leg bones, like, nothing. Not even, like, the really meaty parts of bones. I don't mean, like, meat as in muscle and tissue. I mean, like, the really dense portions, like the petrous portion of your temporal bone inside of your cranium. That one is really hard to even fully cremate in retorts a lot of times. If you do have chunks of bone inside of cremains, it tends to be part of the petrous portion, or it tends to be another hard surface in your body. They're not technically bones, but are really hard, like your teeth. So what I'm getting at is that I would expect to see something like precisely how long did the corvids wait until they went over there? Did that sandstorm that blew through the day before somehow magically cover absolutely every single body that they had picked clean just overnight? Like, is the sandstorm just an excuse for them to not have to go through and deal with putting those set pieces out? Maybe. I don't know. How much sand am I supposed to expect in this Las Vegas sandstorm? Absolutely everywhere, where it's clearly somehow evenly deposited in such a way as to hide every single set of undead remains that were left there. I got a lot of questions about the bodies here, you guys. Again with the questions about the bodies. This is like the third one. But this movie left me with a lot of questions. Don't get me wrong, though. It is one of my favorite Resident Evil movies. I enjoy Extinction a lot. I really enjoy the visual aspects, especially. So, anyway, moving forward. There are upturned cars. There's cars on their backs. for some reason in there, but there are no bodies anywhere, absolutely anywhere. So we're going forward, and the desert sand has really heaped up all over Vegas, and they're like, okay, let's go ahead and check the valet station for their gas pumps. There should be some in there, because LJ once dropped $2,000 in Vegas, so he remembers the valet area having gas pumps. So they decide they're going to go to that, and meanwhile LJ is getting worse, but seemingly no one seems to recognize that he is sick in this way. I mean, I feel like this is a very specific way to get sick in our hero's universe, and you would think that over the past 5 years, lots of them would have recognized the symptoms as they go along, particularly since it seems that a lot of folks would not tell you in the middle of a zombie apocalypse whether or not they've been bitten, just as LJ does not. So I would imagine they've seen this happen a lot, but for whatever reason, nobody seems to recognize that this man is like turning gray and sweating and looks quite unwell in a very specific zombie-like way. So LJ is getting worse, but he's like, oh yeah, he's still cognizant, and so people aren't thinking about it, I guess. And he's like, yeah, let's go and check the valet station. But the valet station is blocked by a cargo container and then a whole bunch of sand as well that is going down underneath the casinos and stuff into the valet area. So they're like, crap, we're going to have to move this cargo container and get this other stuff out of the way so we can get down there. But they are bound and determined to get in there, and it seems relatively safe since the corvids have allegedly eaten all of the undead anyway. Again, super weird, but it does give it somewhat of an eerie component. And I think that if they would have tried to put it anywhere else, it would not have worked as well, perhaps. There's just something about seeing Vegas just so devoid of life. It was such a wild concept when this movie first came out and I saw it. It was so hard to imagine a Vegas that looked like that. But now seeing a very similar scene with coronavirus, just without the excess sand, it's like, whoa, okay, this is really what it could look like. Nothing else is going to shut down Vegas but an apocalypse, more or less. But my point is that it's very striking, and it also helps promote this sense of eeriness, because not only are there no living there, there are also seemingly no undead there. It is just absolutely empty and quiet and still. There's no wildlife either, so it's just incredibly still. And that is the point where they decide to move the cargo container. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss what they find with that cargo container.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Before the break, we were talking about the trip to Vegas and how it is just a desert wasteland at this point, more or less. The buildings are still there, but there is not a sight of a soul living or dead, and it's eerily quiet. They're trying to get down into the valet area to get the gas that is in the gas tanks down there, But when they go to access it, there's a cargo container in the way. So Alice steps forward to check it out while everyone else, steps back and is just chilling for a minute. And she listens to the inside of it and she's like, uh-oh, like something is clearly wrong. She can feel that something is wrong. And she listens to it and then she's like, everybody get back. And so everybody gets their weapons up and they jump backwards and out pour all of these zombies. They just they Sparta kick the door down, I guess, of this cargo container and decide that they're going to go ahead and kill everybody right there. Right then, right there. So I don't know why the zombies waited until she got there. On the one hand, they are smart enough to use logic and reasoning, but on the other hand, they clearly still just enjoy killing things. So I'm not sure. Did Dr. Isaac tell them to just chill until Alice came by? Did he knock them all out and they were more or less chloroformed until Alice got close enough? Or did they just not care that they were in the dark of this container until Alice came by and then they just felt her presence or something? I'm not sure. But anyway, they waited until Alice stuck her ear to the cargo door and then they went ahead and Sparta kicked it out at her. And at that point, everybody starts freaking out because it's not just one zombie. It was a lot, you guys. It was 20 or more. And weirdly, to me at least, they all remind me of the Dagdamor from Shannara Chronicles Season 1. Every time I look at the zombies in specifically the ones that Dr. Isaacs made in Resident Evil Extinction, I just see the Dagdamor. I know that they look a bit different, and there are no piercings on these zombies' faces. But still, go ahead and look at the two of them. See if it reminds you of anything. But their eyes are totally blacked out. These are clearly very different zombies from the ones that they are used to. And they're also super strong and super fast. So they are chasing these folks down immediately. Remember, half the caravan is kids and stuff at this point. So a lot of people go down and don't come back up. It's bad news bears, you guys, for the team and the caravan. So they're in the caravan and everybody's running around. The folks who were in vehicles, for the most part, get out of vehicles. Kmart and LJ, though, find their way into one of the vans or SUVs and wait there and just shoot them through the windows, essentially. And we have that one guy as well who has climbed way up on top of the Eiffel Tower structure so that he could be their lookout. Granted, there was nothing for him to look out for, but he had a solid sniper position and he had a pretty good reason to be up there. We've also established earlier that Claire likes a good perimeter, so he is essentially acting like the 360-degree cameras that they have, but without them having to break out the four-wheeler and set those up and monitor them from the van and everything. So at least they did a really good job setting up that guy being there. But everything is just absolute carnage. Alice has to break out the blades and is slicing and dicing through them, but we do see that they're harder for her to get than some of the other zombies that we have seen her fight at this point. So Alice is running through and plowing through a lot of them, but we can also see Dr. Isaacs and his team are watching all of this happen. So they're very interested to see how Alice reacts. And now that I think about it, perhaps Dr. Isaacs activated the zombie somehow from where he was. Who knows? It's mad science, you guys. So Alice is going through and she is chopping and slashing and everybody is shooting people. And Claire is just really, really unhappy right now that everyone around her is dying. This was exactly what she was afraid of if they were to try another course like this. And so she's just doing her best, but her people are dying right in front of her. And this is not the first time it's happened. In fact, this just happened a day or a few days before this. So for Claire, she just buried a bunch of people, and that's on the tail end of losing 50% of her people before that point. as Carlos had explained to Alice when Alice joined the group. So this is a lot for her, and she's been holding it together, but you can see that Claire's strength is almost brittle at this point. Like, she is going to do everything that she can for these people, but she's been putting on a brave face for a while, and things are very, very hard for her right now. So they are just all trying to do their best, and Carlos is also in the fray, fighting and everything. And we get to this point where LJ is really starting to look like crap. Kmart seemingly doesn't notice, but we are in a big zombie battle right now. And he still hasn't told anyone at all that zombie mirror chick bit him earlier when he was in the hotel, and there was a mirror in there, and he thought the zombie was in front of him, and she was actually behind him, and he was seeing her reflection. So he's still not told anyone because it's on his chest, so they can't see it, and turns while he is in the car with Kmart. So she is freaking out and trying to fight him off, and there's even crazier zombies outside, so she is in a catch-22, and then Carlos comes and rips LJ out of the car and shoots him. And so he does that, but not before Carlos gets bitten by LJ. Not even one of the other zombies that they're fighting, the really crazy strong and fast ones, or anything else that they've battled over the past 5 years, but his own friend, because his friend didn't tell him that he was infected. So that also makes me think of coronavirus, because the same people who will not actually practice social distancing are the same people who will go ahead and not tell you they were bit by a zombie in the middle of the apocalypse, not even as they're getting really sick and are getting very close to turning. So make sure that you guys are doing what you need to for that. That would be really dope. I would appreciate it, as would all of my friends who are immune compromised or otherwise at an excessive risk of obtaining this disease because they are in healthcare, or they're death workers, or they have diabetes or cardiovascular issues. Let's all do our best and not be the guy who ends up getting his friend killed because he didn't tell them that he got infected and he didn't follow proper protocol to avoid infection to begin with. Let's not be that guy. Let's be more like Carlos. Don't get me wrong, LJ was still a great guy while he was alive, except for the whole part about not telling anybody that he was infected. But at the end of the day, does the fact that he was a good person really help Carlos? No, it does not. It cannot change the fact that Carlos gets bitten. And Claire is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but Carlos is paramilitary. He was paramilitary before he joined their apocalypse caravan, and he also is right up there with Alice in regards to who are the best fighters on this team. And that is how I'd rank them. Claire, of course, is also great, but in the same scene, we see a bunch of these zombies, like 3 or 4 of these really strong ones, are taking on one of those white dudes that was an expendable character in this. I don't remember if he drove the van or the bus, but one of those. And she's just really upset, and they're totally on top of him. I think it was the van guy, the news van guy. And there's nothing she can do about it. But so she just is in a rage and grief in the middle of this fight and just walks forward shooting them over and over again. But she's not aiming for the head, and it's been 5 years. I'm pretty sure Claire knows it takes a headshot, so her being in this grief and rage is really not helping anyone. It's not getting them off the kid, and it's not killing them. It's just emptying her clip and wasting bullets in a time and place in which that can be a scarce resource. So that's kind of a waste at that point. Now, I understand Claire's grief and her rage, and I think she's totally entitled to it. However, I am saying that factors in for me when I am looking at ranking my fighters here. How is their calm under pressure? How is their presence of mind? So for this movie, I'm going to say Alice, Carlos, Claire. Or maybe even Carlos, Alice, Claire. Carlos isn't having all these flashbacks and everything to clones. I guess they're not flashbacks. I don't know what they are. But a psionic connection, perhaps. He doesn't have psionic abilities to mess with them when he has bad dreams and everything. But Carlos is, my point is that Carlos is one of the best fighters that they have. And he just totally gets obliterated because this dude does not tell them that he has this virus. Although he was gray and sweaty and looked like crap. So I also question everyone else's critical thinking skills 5 years into an apocalypse in not knowing what any of the symptoms look like. All right, we're going to go on a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what happens next in this battle with Dr. Isaacs.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about all of the carnage going on in Las Vegas and how we can see Claire almost rage grieving in the moment, which I'm totally here for. Everyone always acts like people's heads are totally in the moment while they're in the heat of battle. And grief and anger and rage are very much those types of emotions that are magnified in situations like that when your adrenaline is pumping. So I'm here for it. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I really enjoyed seeing that aspect of a leader. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and we're also going to talk about what is going on with Dr. Isaacs and the rest of this fight. So there's carnage everywhere. Our boy on top of the Eiffel Tower has sadly been pulled down by zombies. He sacrifices himself, though. I really like that dude. He was a very minor character in many ways. But he was up there on the Eiffel Tower, and some chick decided she was going to climb up there to try to escape the zombies. But these aren't the regular zombies. These are climbing zombies. And so these climbing zombies that can use logic and reason went ahead and followed her up there. And they're really strong. They're really fast. They got great upper body strength. So she did not get very far before they took her down. But well, technically they didn't take her down. They kept chasing after her and everything. But a lot of them glommed on to him, and he told her to keep climbing and go. And then he launched himself and them off of this Eiffel Tower-like structure in order to save her. So I like that dude. He was pretty cool. We didn't know him that well, but he had a lot of heart, even if we did not know much about his character. It was still nice. I feel like it would have meant a little bit more to us had he had more lines before that, but I guess there was already a lot going on in this movie, so, you know, it is what it is. But I still appreciate him, even if I didn't know him that well. So I feel like the actor did a very good job in as few words that he had, as few lines as he had, to really establish who he was as a person. And I appreciate that. So while everyone is fighting and Claire is just wasting bullets, pumping away at these zombies with her firearm, even though she knows she should aim for the head, and she's not bothering because she's just grief and rage shooting. And we have Carlos over here getting bitten by LJ before having to put LJ down. And Alice is climbing these stairs and everything, trying to just kill all of these zombies. She is slashing and hacking her way through all of them. And once she gets most of them out of the way, we see Dr. Isaacs tell everyone else, hey, once she is clear, go ahead and shut her down. So once she's clear of all of those zombies, because again, Isaacs does not have full control over them, they go ahead and shut her down. So she's just standing there like an action figure, unable to move. And they're doing this with the satellite that is overhead. So she is shut down and just standing there, and he's like, sweet, let's go in and get her here in a minute when things clear up. However, Claire has just reached her absolute limit right now, and she just lets out this piercing, frustrated scream that is full of rage and grief. And something inside of Alice picks up on that, and she fights the satellite and backs it off of her in order to regain control of her faculties, which is not something that they'd believe she would be able to do. It didn't even cross their minds that that's something that Alice could do. I'm not sure if it's just a connection that she has with Claire, like their kinship as leaders and as women who have this heavy load really thrust upon them, this mantle that they are carrying and their force of will. I'm not sure exactly why it's Claire particularly that breaks through, because there are other people screaming. They're screaming in horror and everything, but it's Claire's rage and grief that really seems to break through to Alice, whereas the other screams never do. And I'm not sure as to whether or not that was intentional, but regardless, I really enjoyed that as a narrative component. Art is subjective, and that's the way that I viewed it, and that scene really stuck with me, and that's part of the reason why I keep going back to Resident Evil Extinction. I really love the aesthetics of it and the visualizations. I also really enjoy these little elements that they put into it. It reminds me of Stargate SG-1 in some ways, in the storytelling style, in how they show you things in different ways, and it's not very expositional. Everything is seen, not told, for the most part. And I think that storytelling element that we find here is one of the reasons why Resident Evil Extinction is one of the best Resident Evil movies. Like, it came out in 2007, and granted, graphics weren't terrible in 2007, but they also weren't hyper advanced, at least not to the point that we have a lot of things today. We've been kind of spoiled with these Marvel movies and everything, but the practical effects and the set design that they used for Resident Evil Extinction make it to where I can still watch this movie at any time, and I'm like, okay, cool, this could have been made in the past 5 years, it could have been made in the past 20 years, and it's still a really great movie. It's right up there with the original movie for me. I find it hard to choose between the two. I do really love Michelle Rodriguez's character as well in the original Resident Evil, and I love getting to know these characters initially. But I do think that Extinction is it's really hard. It's one of the two. One of the two are my favorite. But they're very well written, especially Resident Evil Extinction. So in Extinction, we have Alice disabled by the satellite, but she hears Claire's scream of rage and despair and then snaps out of it. So she breaks the link with the satellite that was holding sway over her. And then she proceeds to take out a few zombies and locate Dr. Isaacs. So she takes out the zombies on her way to take out Isaacs. She doesn't even care about the zombies right now. She has blood in her eyes at this point, and she knows who is causing this and what's going on because she had that connection to the satellite. They didn't understand that was going to work both ways. So the satellite was controlling her momentarily, but she is now, with her growing psionic powers, been able to turn that around and access the satellite, which is very similar to how we saw her earlier notice that the satellite was overhead and ask Carlos, what time is it? And then go, oh, okay, I must be being paranoid, because she could feel it. I think that similarly, she may have been able to feel the zombies on the other side of the cargo hold. I'm not sure if she was truly feeling them, but I feel like she could have, since Dr. Isaacs had a hand in that as well and was using part of her DNA with it. So I think she really could feel them, and it wasn't just her hearing what was inside of it. She knew that something was mad wrong and the Umbrella had found her, that there was a cargo container full of zombies that were about to break out. So Alice breaks straight for him, and they obviously start freaking out because they know that this is really bad news bears. They still refer to her as Project Alice for the most part, and I think that's really important in Umbrella's use of terminology and emphasizing that element of humanity again. They don't really see Alice as a human, or rather, they have no care overall for human life, or any type of life, dead or undead. At this point, everyone is essentially expendable to them unless you are unique, like this science project that Dr. Isaacs has going on, and his hunt for Alice and the clones. He's just fixated on her in many ways. So she starts taking out their team. So she utilizes the connection to the satellite and goes ahead and starts gunning everybody down who's in there. And in the fray, Isaac gets bitten by one of his own creations. I very much enjoyed that part, as I'm sure many people did. We're meant to really love that part. He's been built up to be an unequivocal terrible person. He is very much a mad scientist. He's not like a quirky mad scientist who might be able to be made lovable, like Krieger maybe in Archer, or like Karaticus Potts in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. This is full on hardcore evil mad scientist. So he has no redeeming qualities. He and Wesker don't get along, but it has nothing to do with morality or ethics. They're just both terrible in their own specific ways, and they disagree in how to go about being terrible people. That's it. So I really enjoyed that part, and he manages to escape on the chopper with a couple of other people. Not people who had been in the tent with him, but literally like the pilot and co-pilot of this chopper. But he's been bitten, and so they know that that's bad news bears, and he's like, I need the antivirus. And so they fly him as fast as they can back to the North American site in the desert, which is very close to Vegas. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the antivirus, or 10, that Isaac ends up taking.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how Alice has somehow flipped control of this satellite in order to access its information, and she is able to get to Dr. Isaacs, but not before he escapes, in also being bitten by one of his own creations. So he is on a chopper headed back to the North American site in the middle of the desert that's somewhere nearby Las Vegas. And someone else from the caravan runs up onto the roof and sees Alice put her gun down. And they're like, why didn't you shoot him? And Alice said, because we're not going to take the caravan to Alaska. We're going to take that chopper. We're going to go find them, and we're going to take their chopper and fly everybody up there. Now, I feel like there were maybe too many people to try to cram into a helicopter. And no one really seemed to discuss, like, who was going to fly this helicopter. Maybe I missed that part, or maybe it just didn't seem important at the time. But yeah, so they decide they're going to go take this helicopter. So they go and they talk in the parking lot, essentially, about this. We don't see them bury the dead this time, but that's not really important. We already got the point across earlier that Claire is the type of leader who values humanity and in burying our dead, and I think that's why we really didn't need 2 of those scenes. We get it. She probably did it again if she is able to. And they decide they're going to go ahead and drive on over there. Carlos, being the awesome dude that he is, goes ahead and lets everybody know, hey guys, I've been bitten. I'm going to die now. And Alice is like, hey, we're going to get you the antivirus. You know there's an antivirus just as well as I do, and we're going to get that for you. So they go about like they're planning to do that, and then as they get closer, Carlos lets her know, hey, I don't think I'm going to make it. You and I both know we are not going to make it in there and me get the antivirus in enough time. Now, this raises another question for me, because remember earlier I was like, why did no one notice that LJ looked like death when he was so far gone already, and ask him the question, like, bro, I know this is a rough subject, but were you maybe bitten by a zombie like several days ago in our timeline? Because this is bad news bears. You look like crap. You in fact look like you've been bitten by a zombie. Carlos looks at Alice and he's like, you and I both know I'm not going to make it much longer. So he at least recognizes the symptoms of zombie bites and the duration as to the time of infection until it totally takes him over. And Alice definitely knows. And both of those people have seen LJ in the last 24 hours. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Claire, as intelligent as she is, likely also recognized it. Now, I get we did kill off the medic, and was that perhaps so no one would mention anything about LJ? Maybe. But if Carlos and Alice can look at Carlos and know, then I feel like someone should have known with LJ. Unless they're entirely going off of the timing from the bite. Who's to say? I'm just saying a lot of these people seem to be crack shots, and they seem to have really good eyesight, especially that guy who serves as their sniper / lookout up on the Eiffel Tower, and yet no one noticed LJ looked like crap. It's just like, Legolas, what do your elf eyes see? Definitely not a guy who is infected. I mean, I see some cargo containers, and I see a whole lot of sand from up here, but I don't see any guy who's infected, even though I rode on over here with him. So I'm still confused about that. That just made me more confused when I got to that point. I'm like, okay, guys, we'll leave that there. Now, granted, I know I just spent a lot of time saying this was very well written, and in many ways, it really is. But there's gonna be some plot holes, just like a lot of the other franchises that we know and love. Sometimes there's just plot holes, you guys, and that's okay. We'll patch them over with some pea gravel and everything. It'll be fine. So anyway, we're going to shoot forward to where Dr. Isaac is. So he's taken an antivirus, or 10. He's clearly taken a lot. There's just vials of it all over the table when the guy who's the go-between, the messenger between Wesker and Dr. Isaacs, comes in, and he's like, hey, you've gone too far. I told you not to requisition all that equipment and not to do anything without Wesker's permission, and instead you went ahead and screened Wesker's voice and made a computer protocol to go ahead and order all of the stuff and make all these zombies so that you could go and get Alice. So Wesker said, like, he is fed up with you. He's done with you right now because you are just as evil as he is, but you just won't listen to him. And that's really the crux of the issue. And so he's like, you've been slated for liquidation. And so Isaacs is like, liquidation? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to kill you. And so he just shoots him in the gut, which again, he's been bitten, but whatever. Okay, so he's been shot in the gut and goes down, and Isaacs looks particularly gross right before he's put down. He is very clearly sick. He looks a little bit deformed in some ways as well. Like, he does not look the same that he did before. And yet this man who works in a zombie research facility shoots him in the gut. So Isaacs goes down, and the guy turns around and is like talking to the guard at the door, and it's just like, God, I hate that guy. And then Isaac comes back up and then lashes him with 3 tentacles that come out of his right hand, like some kind of horrifying Reed Richards or Mr. Fantastic. Like, it's really gross, the way that it looks, but it just immediately reminded me of Reed. And again, just like Reed Richards, it's science gone wrong. Was it Reed's fault that they were exposed to those rays? Who's to say? But in this case, this guy was definitely at fault. Reed was in the wrong place, the cosmic wrong time. But this guy, Dr. Isaacs, he has tentacle hands now. So there's that. That's just his new reality, but he's very jazzed about it. He thinks he's the next step in evolution, and I just really want my self-esteem to be that high, that I can turn into some kind of weird zombie tentacle monster and be like, oh yes, I am hot-ish. This is great. This is the body that I strive for. I've achieved my bodily ideal, and I feel great about me. I feel super smart, and I feel like I can take on the world. Literally, that is what Isaacs is saying at a certain point. He's like, I'm literally going to take over the world. I got this. It's like he thinks he's Beyonce at this point. So Isaacs continues going about his business and doing chaos, of course, killing the guards and everything. And we cut back to Alice and Claire and everyone. So they decide they're going to go ahead and do a raid on them. And since Carlos can't make it, he's such a good dude, Carlos goes ahead and is like, you guys, I'm just going to drive the tanker truck with all the fuel that we have left straight into that facility. And I'm thinking they probably did fuel up in Vegas because it was a long way to wherever Isaacs was at the North American facility. So they probably did go ahead and dig out all that sand and get gas, or dumped all the gas from the other containers into it. There was supposed to be a lot of gas. It was a lot of gas, you guys. So he's like, I'm going to drive some dynamite in there, and I'm going to blow this sucker up and take everyone out so that you guys can get in and go, because I'm going to die regardless. So Carlos, literally our ride or die for this. He was there for them through everything until he literally couldn't be, and then he gave himself selflessly. So Carlos goes and drives this tractor trailer with a gas tanker on the back of it, and he goes ahead and blows them up. So he drives in there real fast, then cuts it kind of a little sharp. It's not entirely clear if he meant to do that or not. It looked like an intentional move, perhaps, but then he was like, because he got thrown all over the cabin. But it still maintains his cool, because that's who Carlos is. And so he's like, man, I really wish I had a cigarette. And while he's upside down in this tanker, just watching the zombies come, he finds a joint. And he's very excited about that. He's like, LJ, I knew you were holding out on me. So we can see also he doesn't hold any hard feelings against LJ. He understands it was a hard decision he had to make. And he goes ahead and is remembering his friend as the friend he was, instead of the zombie that he shot in the face. And he takes the joint, he lights it up, and he lights the dynamite and just smokes while he waits for the dynamite to go off. And he just looks so relaxed, like not even just resigned. Resignation makes me feel like the person is like not happy about it, but they've come to grips with the fact that's going to happen. But he looks absolutely chill. He almost looks blissed out at that point. He's just like, all right, man, this is how it goes. And everything blows. And so Alice and the rest of the caravan immediately drive straight in through that gate and go ahead and they get everybody onto the helicopter. And Claire goes to pilot it, which is cool. And then Kmart's like, wait, you're not coming? And Alice is like, no, I have something to do. So it looks like Alice and Carlos knew what Alice and Carlos were going to do, because Alice and Carlos were like, good luck to you out there. Everyone knew what Carlos was going to do because, they said their goodbyes and stuff. But only Carlos seemed to know what Alice was going to do, because before they parted and went to drive the tanker truck in there, Carlos looked at her and he said, just do me a favor when you get in there. And she's like, I will. And, he meant, just take the whole thing down, more or less. And it's unspoken. You guys know I love that stuff. And then they kiss. And I'm okay with it. I'm more okay with this kiss than I perhaps am with the Rey and Kylo Ren kiss. I am. Let's just say that outright. I like this one more than that one. That one felt totally unnecessary. This one felt perhaps somewhat unnecessary, but also, I get it. They understand each other. They have a shared history. They probably thought they were never going to see each other again. And they share a lot of the same burdens of command and everything. They just get each other. And to feel like someone really knows you and you're heard and seen and understood, that can be pretty powerful. But I think especially in a situation like this apocalypse that they're going through, and especially since no matter what powers Alice exhibits, Carlos never looks at her differently. And I think that they have a really cool connection. So I'm totally here for it. You could tell before they were fond of each other. Whereas with Rey and Kylo Ren, I just couldn't figure out at some points whether he was just fixated on her, or if it was like, if they were going to turn out to be siblings. And maybe that built up my expectations for where it was going to go and prohibited me from really viewing them as being together. I'm not sure, but I never really felt like Rey reciprocated that. It felt more like she was fascinated by him and interested in the connection itself as it relates to the Force connection, but not really an emotional connection. So anyway, I'm fine with this kiss. I decided that one's fine. The one in National Treasure still bothers me, but this one, I'm like, okay, it at least makes sense. It fits in with the story. And it really, they did a really good job with it. Even though we didn't get a ton of build-up in this movie towards that, you could tell before with, the hug that Alice gave him and everything when they were talking about why she didn't come and catch up with them, that there was maybe more going on there than we had seen before. And she just looked so relieved to see him at that point. She literally had tears in her eyes. Not especially because it was Carlos necessarily, but I feel like that also helped because he is such a good dude. All right, we are going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the havoc that Alice wreaks inside of the Umbrella Corporation's North American facility.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing the relationship between Carlos and Alice, as well as Carlos's sacrifice and Alice's potential sacrifice, as she did not tell the others that she was going to stay behind and go down into the Umbrella Corporation's underbelly. Claire seems to not really have known in that she was told, but she seems to have expected or suspected that it would probably go down that way, or perhaps Alice told her in secret. Who knows? But Claire just gives her a tight nod And it's very much a goodbye, but, you know, I hope you make it out. If you do, come find me, kind of thing. So Alice is going downstairs, and on her way, as the chopper takes off, Alice looks over into that ditch and sees all the dead Alice bodies that have not decomposed. And she's clearly disturbed by it at this point. So she's disturbed, but she's resolved to handle this. But she's like, okay, clearly this is what's been going on. Maybe at that point her flashback kind of things that were going on where it seemed like a connection to the clones was really making sense to her. So maybe she's like, okay, those weren't flashbacks and stuff. That was a connection to these creatures. Like, he's been messing with my DNA and he's made more me and stuff, clearly to run some kind of gross, dark experiments. So she's really resolved, and she goes inside, and when she reaches the interior, she speaks with the Red Queen's sister computer, and the Red Queen's sister computer informs her that Isaacs has been infected and has been running rampant through the facility on a murder spree. And so Alice is like, why are you helping me? And the computer says that her sister computer wasn't malicious. It was only running the most logical path for containing the virus. And Alice acknowledges that of being of the needs of the many Spock-style philosophy, even if she seems disgusted by it. And the computer tells her that in that way, she is also trying to get Alice to create a cure. She's also trying to contain the virus, and that's why she's helping Alice and containing Isaacs down there on level 7 or so, because she knows, the computer that is, that he is a severe risk, and that Alice has everything in that facility, including her own blood, because that is the cure, and also the facility itself. So all of the different tools and everything that she would need in order to make a cure. So she's like, I need you to, before we make the cure, go down and destroy Isaacs, because I can't keep him contained much longer. This is as good as I can do, and he's going to get out if you don't go and stop him, like now. We don't have time to mess with the cure first. So Alice goes down to level 7 to deal with him, and she's horrified. You can see it on her face. She's seen a lot of stuff in this apocalypse, you guys. She's seen really good friends and other people that she's known just die horribly right in front of her. She has seen all of these creatures, like the corvids and also the dogs and the Nemesis Project and these new souped up zombies. She's seen a lot of horrible things happen and horrible creations. But Isaacs seems to revel in the disgusting carnage that he can create. So it's almost creativity and carnage. And in that way, I mean, I keep saying carnage because, you know, carnage from Spider-Man. So in that way, from the comics and everything, he's really more messed up like Carnage is. He's not just like a regular supervillain. He's having a lot of fun with this because he's excited. He is the forefront of evolution, as he sees it at this point, and he is having a grand old time. He just wants to be let out of his cage. That's the only thing that Isaacs is bothered by right now. So she is really grossed out and horrified. There's like people planted on stakes and stuff everywhere. He didn't bother to make any more zombies. He just went ahead and killed everyone in there, just for the joy, seemingly, of killing them. It doesn't even look like he's necessarily eaten on any of them, because as he said with his new creations, they have a hunger for flesh, but they have no need to eat. And that is when they had like limited cognitive and reasoning skills, whereas he still has his entire mind. He's just a bloodthirsty creature now, but again, not necessarily eating everybody. So Alice is walking through there seeing this crazy stuff, and then she sees a clone of herself naked in a liquid stasis pod and seems odd, yet also horrified and saddened. I really love Mila Jovovich's face. She has such a great range of facial expressions, and she can tell us so much just by looking at her. And I know that's what actors are supposed to do, but if you watch these scenes and just see like the cascades of emotions across her face, and also just the way she combines them too, I think she's exceptionally talented in that regard. So while she's looking at this, she is caught off guard by Isaac striking. The clone that she's looking at is pretty much birthed from her liquid stasis pod into Alice's arms. Alice goes to catch her as she comes out, and Alice has wounded Isaac, so he runs off. And it's really surreal and kind of great how this scene plays out, because it looks like the clone is both birthed into her arms and dies in her arms. So Alice, her resolve is really renewed, and she's extra angry right now. And so she goes ahead and she covers that body with her jacket, I think, and then chases down Isaac's. So they start fighting in the Manor area testing ground, and we see another display of Alice's psionic powers, which seem to be growing, but they're still exhausting her. So things are not going well in this fight. But one of my favorite parts of this is we get to see the use of reflection in the story again. So they use a lot of visual reflection in this movie. So at one point we see the reflection of one of the people's faces in the sunglasses of the zombie that he's fighting. I think it's LJ when they're fighting in the room that has the zombie mirror chick in it. And you can see his reflection in like his sheer panic as he's trying to fight this guy off. He was just not ready. And I love how they display that. We also get to see it in the mirror when he goes to shoot at the mirror, and it turns out that the zombie is behind him. And that was just exceptionally well played. It was well filmed. It was gorgeous. And then there was also at this point, when Alice is walking around the manor, she sees a picture on it with that turd guy from before and her in a relationship. And she just looks absolutely disgusted by this. But it's the same picture that every other Alice clone before her has picked up and taken a look at as they've been let out of stasis, and showing us how close these Alices really are to our Alice. So she picks it up and she's looking at it, and then she sees Isaac's behind her in the reflection of the picture. And I really love that. It was pretty dope. So at this point, they start fighting and end up in the trap that Isaac's had made for Alice's clone tests. And it's the area where it's the pristine white and like plastic or glass room, and it has a laser that comes through there that cuts you off at the stomach, and then it turns the other way and it cuts you in chunks in a grid pattern. So at this point, Alice has really resigned herself to dying with Isaac. She's like, all right, this is where I go. She doesn't look particularly upset about it. She's not as chill as Carlos is at that point, but at this point she's like, this is what's happening. And she is happy at least to take him out with her. So she's like, I'm going to die right here. And the grid starts advancing. And just after the grid gets Isaac and continues advancing on her, it stops. But it's not from her psionic powers. It is from the Alice clone that she had covered up, including over its face, thinking that it was dead. So that Alice clone is outside of the room and hit the button just in time to stop it. So then we cut from the North American facility to one in the Asian continent. And Wesker says he expects results within 1 month because now he's in charge. So this has actually worked out pretty fine for Wesker because we have that doctor out of the way. He still has access to that guy's research. And he's like, yeah, I think I can get answers a lot quickly. I can get results a lot more quickly than Isaac's could. He's very smug about this. He is certain that he can. And then Alice joins the holographic meeting, our Alice, and tells them that they're not going to have to wait that long, that she will be bringing a few of her friends and heading over to him. And then she steps back out of the hologram, and we go ahead and see that she and the other Alice are looking down a super long, almost warehouse type corridor at all of these like dozens and dozens and dozens of Alices in all of these rows of these pods, like super way high up and spanning really far across. Think kind of the scope and magnitude of Cerebro, but also just filled full of pods. So maybe like one of the vampire movies where they keep humans as blood bags everywhere. So that's what it looks like. And there are just so many Alices at this point. And a lot of them seem to be waking up in the stasis pods, whereas before Isaacs had been like waking one at a time, which is of course a great idea. You don't need multiple Alices. One, they'll know that they're a clone. Two, as soon as they figure that out, they're going to kick your butt. So we have them at this point. We now see that there are all of these clones, and that is the end of the movie. So we have Claire going on to Alaska. We have Alice and this new army of clones threatening to come and get Wesker within 1 month. And we have Wesker being prepared for it, I suppose. It would have been perhaps a lot better of a move to not tell Wesker that she was going to come and get him and that they had all those clones. But, you know, we needed the setup for the sequel, you guys. We needed to be able to see that it was coming. And so in that way, it was framed well. It was very chill. But also, like, just from a tactics point of view, come on, Alice. Like, why are you giving him time to prepare? Now he's going to have something extra messed up for you when you get there. You've given Wesker an entire month to do some jacked up stuff that Dr. Isaacs was able to do in like a week. So, great. And he has Isaac's material to build off of. That didn't seem very smart, but it's whatever. I really enjoyed this movie because I really love its themes of humanity, to be honest. There's a lot more going on in this story than just a cool story and zombies. And there's not necessarily a moral, per se. I wouldn't say that there's a moral, but I would say that there is commentary on it. There's social commentary, sociocultural commentary, and I really like that in my movies. And even when it doesn't have a moral, like Star Trek. I know I talk about this a lot because of Star Trek really seems to have a moral, but sometimes it will present you with questions rather than answers. Here, though, we just have straight up commentary, and I really enjoy that. I also enjoy that with the Orville as well. I know you probably did not come in here today expecting me to compare the Orville to Resident Evil Extinction, but here we find ourselves at the end of the show, voicing that consideration. Think about it. Just think about it. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.